Tonight, we begin with a simple question: how well do we truly know the people we let into our lives? In São Paulo, Brazil, a law student named Ana Paula Veloso Fernandes lived a life that seemed ordinary. She studied law, she cared for her family, she showed kindness to neighbors. Yet behind that facade, investigators believe something far more sinister was unfolding. This is not a story about monsters hidden in shadows. It is a story of quiet deception, of someone who may have turned knowledge, patience, and trust into tools of destruction. Over a period of months in 2025, 4 people died under suspicious circumstances. The common thread? Poison. Friends, lovers, landlords, all believed safe, may have ingested a lethal substance masked in food or drink. Reports suggest she tested poisons on animals, manipulated victims with lies, and concealed bodies where they would remain undiscovered for days. As courts and forensic experts dig deeper, many questions remain unanswered. What motivated her? How did she procure the poisons? What will evidence ultimately show? Join me, Nora, on Dark Justice, as we piece together the fragments of this chilling case, the victims she touched, the investigation behind closed doors, and the uncertainty that lingers today. This is not just a case of life or death, it is a test of belief, trust, and the dark potential hidden in human minds. Ana Paula Veloso Fernandes was 36. She studied law. She lived in the São Paulo metro area in a modest neighborhood, balancing ordinary routines with her academic ambitions. To acquaintances, she appeared level-headed and polite. But in her past, investigators would uncover hints that something darker lay beneath. Her financial life, according to court records and media reports, was irregular. She associated with individuals in different states. She rented properties. She moved in spaces where both power and dependence might intersect. Some sources suggest she lived in more than one residence, sometimes shared spaces in Guarulhos, sometimes in the Baixada Fluminense region near Rio de Janeiro. Over time, small inconsistencies began to nag at investigators. In one case, a landlord reported that her residence emitted an odor of decay. Neighbors mentioned strange smells, disappearing people, odd delivery of supplies. She maintained plausible stories. She appeared to manage dual roles, student, mother, tenant, flexibly shifting narratives as needed. Importantly, her method would require knowledge: how to acquire toxic substances, how to hide evidence, and how to blend in while concealing past. Poison is an intimate weapon. It demands precision, access, trust, and patience. It does not rely on brute strength. To use it repeatedly, one must be careful, observant, and cold. As the first unexplained death reached the hands of the local police, it was initially treated as natural. But as the months passed and more deaths surfaced, patterns emerged. The clues were subtle, overlapping timelines, trusted access, food or drink as vectors. Investigators began to suspect that these were not isolated events, but elements of a greater design. By the end of 2024 into early 2025, investigators in São Paulo and Rio began sharing intelligence discreetly across jurisdictions. The shadow of one suspect grew darker. It is in that haze of uncertainty and suspicion that our next part begins, when the first victim would die under contested circumstances and the investigation would awaken. The first death that would later draw scrutiny was that of Marcelo Harry Fonseca. Age estimates vary. According to public filings, Marcelo shared a meal with Ana Paula. Soon after, he fell severely ill. Symptoms aligned with poisoning: nausea, convulsions, internal collapse. His death was sudden, and investigators initially ruled natural causes. Yet something stayed in their minds: the proximity, the fact that Ana Paula had been near him that night, the food she brought, the inconsistencies in her timeline. No single clue was enough until additional deaths followed a similar pattern. In the next case, Maria Aparecida Rodrigues reportedly consumed a food item that she offered to others. She became ill rapidly and died. Again, no external signs of violence. But when police later compared records, they noticed that in both cases, Ana Paula was among the last people to interact with the victim. Further, in both cases, she had access to their homes or their food. Then came Neil Correa da Silva. His death mirrored the others: ingestion followed by sudden decline. Here, some witnesses described confusion in his departure from Ana Paula's home. Some messages revealed she had been visiting or delivering something. Investigators began collecting texts, testimonies, and financial ledgers. The fourth victim, Haida Mahazres, adds further complexity. Media reports and court documents suggest that he was allegedly manipulated through a feigned pregnancy scheme. Some say she claimed to be pregnant, perhaps to gain his emotional trust, and used that access to facilitate poisoning. The evidence is still under validation. At this point, law enforcement agencies in São Paulo and Rio had recognized a suspicious pattern. Each death, by itself, might have been dismissed. But together, the timing, the proximity, the food as the vector, and Ana Paula's relationship to each victim, the investigators began to suspect one person might be orchestrating multiple killings. Authorities then decided to reopen earlier, natural cause fatalities. Autopsies were revisited, toxicology tests requested, and police units from multiple municipalities began coordinating. What was once dismissed as tragedy was now seen as potentially deliberate homicide, and the suspect at center was one of them, the woman behind the smiles. One of the most disturbing threads in this case is the allegation that Ana Paula tested the poison first on animals. Several widely published reports claim she killed multiple dogs to observe dosage and effect. These allegations appear in court filings and investigator summaries cited by Brazilian media. If true, it reveals a harrowing pattern of experimentation before targeting humans. Why animals first? Because it offers a testing ground. Dogs, in many cases, can die quickly. If toxic levels are calibrated, a perpetrator can measure time, quantity, symptom progression. Publicly, authorities assert these animal deaths were not random cruelty, but part of a methodical process. That these claims are repeated in multiple news outlets suggests prosecutors are treating them as substantive evidence. But allegations are not final proof. Defense teams are likely to challenge whether the animals died from poison or disease, whether chain of custody was maintained, and whether forensic evidence directly links them to Ana Paula. The courts must scrutinize each claim. In another revealing episode, reports state that Marcelo's body remained at Ana Paula's home for days undiscovered or ignored. Investigators claim she attempted concealment. She burned or destroyed pieces of furniture in that location. She covered parts of the body so decomposition would not be obvious to neighbors. Some reports say foul odor complaints were raised. These acts of concealment strengthen the case for deliberate homicide, not accidental death. If true, they show how far a suspect might go to delay discovery and mislead investigators. But as always, these details remain under investigation. Messages, bank statements, and delivery logs are emerging as supporting evidence. Some financial transfers connect Ana Paula to the victims. Some communications suggest manipulation, pleas for help, expressions of guilt, or conflicts. Investigators now treat the case as a network of relationships, lies, and timed killings, rather than disconnected tragedies. In this part of the story, the case shifts from suspicion to pattern. The weapon, once invisible, begins to manifest in overlaps. What remains is to hold each thread and see if they form a rope. In the next part, we follow how authorities mobilize, the legal steps, and the pressure mounting on the suspect. As suspicions hardened into formal charges, law enforcement and prosecutors moved to solidify their case. In São Paulo, judges accepted a complaint tying the 4 deaths to a single suspect. The complaint described each as a qualified homicide, meaning aggravating circumstances such as use of poison, cruelty, or a motive considered vile under Brazilian law. The courtroom accepted that combining the cases was justified. At the heart of the prosecution's case is toxicology. Bodies were exhumed, samples collected, analysts instructed to detect not just presence, but dosage, metabolization, and time of ingestion. The chemical signature of the toxin used becomes central. Only a precise match can tie the crime together. Yet toxicology is also a battleground. The defense can challenge sample contamination, chain of custody, degradation over time, or alternative explanations. If a toxin breaks down before testing, or if samples are mishandled, reasonable doubt might arise. Investigators also turned to messaging logs, banking records, and property rents. They sought to show patterns. Who ordered what, when they visited whom, how money moved between accounts. Some transfer records name Ana Paula as a recipient. Some delivery logs show food or supplies delivered to victims shortly before their deaths. Each link may seem small on its own, but in aggregate, they form a mosaic of motive, access, and opportunity. Prosecutors allege that in at least one instance, Ana Paula falsely claimed pregnancy to emotionally manipulate Hader Mahazres. If proven, this scheme demonstrates planning and emotional leverage to lower defenses and increase trust. That trust, they argue, allowed her access to administer poison. In courtroom documents, prosecutors outline a chilling characterization. The suspect took pleasure in killing. According to reported police statements, she showed no remorse, calculated each move, and sought to perfect her method. These characterizations are controversial, acceptable in investigative summaries, but highly contested in a court of law. Legal teams are preparing duels over evidence. The defense may argue that a single death could be coincidence, or that poisons can appear naturally in the environment. They may challenge the credibility of witnesses who delivered testimonies under duress or fear. They will demand transparency in lab procedures, proof of chain integrity, and explore alternate suspects or motives. Courts will also consider psychological evaluation. Did she act with full awareness? Was there a psychiatric disorder? Could she be legally responsible if she lacked mental capacity? These are not just defenses, they are strategies to mitigate liability or remove criminal intent. Meanwhile, prosecutors must prove beyond a reasonable doubt. They must link method to motive, access to act, and pattern to intentional design. They must answer, how did she procure the toxin? Did she have knowledge of chemistry or contact with suppliers? Did she plan arrival times? Did she clean evidence? Did she act alone or with someone else? In public hearings, media press on every leak. Lawyers fight gag orders. The courtroom is a pressure cooker. Every witness, expert, and sample must endure cross-examination. If the case goes to trial, jurors must weigh not just tragedy, but the burden of proof. And through it all, one question rings loud. Does the evidence cohere? Can prosecutors stitch together timelines, chemicals, deception, and motive into a narrative that overcomes defenses? That is the test ahead. To understand this case, we must look deeper beyond the victims and the evidence into what might have driven a person to weaponize daily life. What can motive, psychology, and context reveal? Poisoners, historically, occupy a unique place in criminal psychology. Their tools allow distance, subtlety, and control. The perpetrator often uses trust of family, friends, or lovers as a vehicle. Many poisoners studied their victims, their diets, routines, medications. That closeness is integral. In Ana Paula's case, reports suggest she cultivated relationships with each victim, embedding herself in their lives until the lethal moment. The allegations she simulated pregnancy to build emotional bonds suggest a deeper strategy. Under that narrative, a man might lower guards, give gifts, settle conflicts. Emotional trust becomes a Trojan horse. If she truly engaged in such manipulation, it shows tactical thinking. It is not just murder, it is betrayal. But motive must also answer the why. What did she gain? Some speculated financial profit, money transfers, rental incomes, or inheritance. Others suggested revenge or psychological satisfaction. Investigators reportedly viewed her as manipulative, remorseless someone who derived power from control. Yet no public document confirms a singular driving motive. In legal strategy, motive is critical. Without motive, even strong evidence might be dismissed as circumstantial. The prosecution may argue that the overlapping access, chemical knowledge, and deceptive narrative combined into a motive of greed, control, or personal gain. The defense may counter that mere proximity is not motive, that financial transfers might be legitimate, or that relationships were consensual and benign. Psychiatrists may be called to testify. Was she driven by personality disorders, narcissism, antisocial traits, psychopathy, or was she a rational actor exercising will under pressure? Did stress, financial strain, or personal conflict push her beyond a threshold? Or was this purely premeditated, cold, and unemotional? Context matters too. Brazil's judicial system handles dozens of cases with overlapping jurisdictions. Sometimes cases are delayed, forensic labs backlog, witness protection is limited. Media sensationalism can muddy perceptions. International press may emphasize glamour or shock over nuance. Local courts, however, rely on formal evidence and procedure. In broader criminology, female serial killers are rare. When women kill, they often use stealth, control, and methods like poisoning or suffocation rather than brute force. Because of social expectations, they may escape suspicion longer. That is part of what makes this case compelling. It challenges stereotypes about who can become a killer and how. Yet even the most meticulously plotted crime has vulnerabilities. Imperfect science, human memory, leaks, chain breaks, objections, conflicting testimony. The defense will attack, the prosecution will respond, and the court will have to weigh fragments. This is not just a criminal trial, it is a battle for truth in a landscape of shadows. As we anticipate the courtroom, the final verdict remains unwritten. But the stakes are clear: justice, reputation, closure. In our closing part, we will look at what happens next, what to watch closely, and what uncertainties continue to loom. This is no simple crime story. The case of Ana Paula Veloso Fernandes is a puzzle of relationships, deception, power, and poison. 4 lives lost. A suspect who walked among them. The question now is, will justice be able to rise above doubt, beyond sensational headlines, and deliver truth? From the first death unnoticed, perhaps dismissed to the pattern that emerged, investigators have chased clues in shadows. Broken messages, exhumed remains, lab reports, manipulated trust. The evidence is complex and fragile, threatened by the fallibility of human memory, chemical degradation, and legal tactics. If the courts find her guilty, the story will be about accountability, how a person betrayed trust and extinguished lives. If she is found not guilty, or if doubts persist, the story will be about the limits of our justice system and the lingering pain for victims' families. Either way, the consequences ripple beyond this one case. For now, we watch, we listen, we evaluate with care. On Dark Justice, we will continue to bring updates, court decisions, forensic releases, new evidence, always with respect for truth and integrity. If you want, we'll do a follow-up video when verdicts are rendered or significant revelations come. Thank you for joining me, Nora, as we journeyed through this haunting case. Please like, subscribe, and ring the bell if you want to stay with Dark Justice on every turn of shadow into light. Until next time, I'll see you in the dark.